Okay, since I don't see any questions coming in the chat, I am going to go ahead and start just with the predefined questions. Usually that starts the trend for us to all want to talk about stuff, and it leads to more conversations. So let's get into it. Okay, so Marco says, could you elaborate a bit on how you would cut up a Q website? That must be a typo, like your own. How do you cut up your website? I need some more elaboration on that. I'm going to go to Mark's question. Then we'll get back to you, Marco. Okay, Mark R says, his biggest question he has right now is that he's triple serving. One of his clients has a health product, and they cannot retarget because of regulations within healthcare, which is unfortunate, but does happen because of patient laws. And one of their competitors has 3 different websites competing in AdWords for the same keywords. Plus, they resell their products through Groupon and Voucher. I know this is against double serving ad policy, but I've read that Google just ignores that policy when it's different people going through. Is that true, or do you have specific examples and experience where Google does take action, and what is the best strategy? Because this is causing a drop in his clients' traffic. I'd like to send more details. Yeah. So Mark, if you are on, let's have you add details into the chat. But this is something that happened to me a lot. I was probably on the other side of this. So I worked with PPC for healthcare quite a bit, nutritional healthcare, and we basically had like an online store. Plus, we had the brand websites for our clients. So we were managing 2 different campaigns and 2 different accounts, and Google never really had a problem with it. I think Google usually gives somebody the benefit of the doubt if it's a different brand or a different website that somebody's advertising on. Anything that's somewhat different, Google will be pretty lenient because they want your money. And so they would rather have 4 people competing against the one than to have just one parent company. And so also a lot of times brands and parent companies and everything are technically different entities, and they have different credit cards, different billing and everything. So it would take a lot of manual work for them to figure that out. And so you'd have to report that potential. You'd have to report your customer's competitor to Google and see what they do about it. But generally speaking, I don't think they're going to do much about it because they don't even necessarily know that. They'd have to go and look at business registrations. They'd have to go through a lot of hoops in order to figure out if it's the same company or not. Although sometimes it's just obvious, but it depends on exactly to a T how their policy is written. And obviously we would need to understand how the policy is written from Google to a T. I haven't read it recently, so I don't know the exact answer. But generally speaking, what I think you have to do is you're not going to be able to just say no competitors, no competition. So you need to start looking at it from a different perspective. And unfortunately, that means that you are going to have expensive clicks. You're going to have a lot of competition out there, and you have to figure out what angle you can provide your clients that differentiates. And obviously in healthcare, there's only so much you can say in your ads, in your ad copy itself. There's only so many keywords you can bid on. I think a lot of times, at least from my experience, health companies are cautious to bid on certain keywords because of not just because of the marketing purposes, but regulatory, legal. There's certain things you just don't want to put into your ads or bid on. And so it is difficult. But I think that the other thing is, the other angle to take at it is that this is the name of the game with healthcare marketing. And so you can't look at this client and try to give them the same KPIs you'd give a client in a different industry. You can't expect them to have the same results. So if you sold them on something that you did for one client in a different industry, they're looking at different things. And I think they know, usually they're resigned to their fate that there's no magic bullets. There's no perfect way to advertise in this particular industry. And so I think that just showing some knowledge of how it works and leveling with them in terms they understand and along with their expectations to say, hey, I understand that this is difficult, that it works here. Let's try to reframe what our expectations are so that instead of beating this competition, we are focused more on carving out our niche in a way that we can, or we're focused on the long-term customer nurturing strategy. We're focused on this as opposed to that, because I think that's really where you need to play. And it's difficult to compete against the 800-pound gorilla. I've been on both sides. I've been the 800-pound gorilla from an advertising perspective, not personally. And I've also been, so my clients have been the ones that are the network that has 4 sites advertising. And then we've also been the ones that are trying to swim uphill against our competitors. And the strategy I always deployed or employed with the underdog role is to embrace that and to start to talk about what it means to be an underdog, what expectations they get, and excuse me, and what do they consider winning? What does that client consider winning on their end as the underdog? It's not going to be an outright win, most likely. It might be a moral victory. It might be profit. It might be something else. And so it's about reframing the objectives and not saying we're going to compete with these people outright, unless that's what they want to do, but that's going to be expensive and likely inefficient. So if you can't compete with somebody outright, what game are you playing, and how do you get that client comfortable with it? And so it's reframing the conversation entirely. It's not about doing the same. It's not about winning a pitch to, based on how you treat other clients. It's a new industry with a new set of expectations, and you need to reframe it in the place that you're playing in. And generally speaking, it's not going to be maximizing profits. Usually it's not going to be maximizing coverage. Those two things are either profitability is difficult because you're competing against 4 different people bidding everything up. So it's going to be more expensive. And then just the overall revenue, like going after everything, is difficult because of the same reason. You have 4 people you're competing against and you can't really afford it. So in those two instances where you can't make enough money, or you can't make a lot of money and you can't make a lot of profit, what do? You have to figure out what those niches are, what the things are where they don't have coverage. What areas are they not focused on? Where do they have their eye off the ball? And then where can you do better? That's where I try to focus it. And then I'd also focus on how do you build up value continuously for this program to the point where it's successful for them. What are their objectives with online advertising? If it's to get in a new customer, what is the lifetime value of that customer? If their objective is to be on top of mind and for branding, is there better channels out there for branding? Is there cheaper ways to do it? And so those are some ways that I think about it. And then also from a remarketing perspective, I don't know that part well enough to see what you can and can't do, but is it pure remarketing? Is it display remarketing? Where are they limited? Excuse me, what are the limitations of their remarketing, retargeting? Is it pure targeting? Is it people who went to the site, and is it not remarketing through display? Can you do search remarketing? Can you do other types of things? Can you do lookalike audiences? Is that possible? What can you do to refine these things? So that might be an opportunity. Heavy geo-targeting, heavy audience refinement, some type of, if you can do remarketing for search ads, RLSAs, is there a way you can basically, instead of going after everybody, going after certain areas of the population? That's going to be more efficient than just going after everybody as well. So you can get more efficiency, but you're never going to be able to compete with maximizing profit or maximizing revenue. You have to sort of play a different ball game, play small ball in that case. Mark, I don't know if you're on. I don't see your name on here, but if you are, let me know. Oh, I do see some Q&A coming through. Okay, cool. Yes, so we have Ricardo. He says, what's your approach to outsourcing work at the beginning? Great question. I don't see that you're on here either, Ricardo, but hopefully you can catch this in the replay. And so, and if you're confused about why I keep on saying Mark's not here, there's 2 different Marks, by the way, everybody, okay? So, okay, so let's get to Ricardo's question. What is your approach to outsourcing work at the beginning? Well, I think it's going to have to be in a story. I meant to tell you this in a story because it's more of a progression. And so if you're really good at sales and you can get a contract, for example, my agency started out with 2 guys. This is in 2002, who got a big fat contract with a very large food and candy company. You probably know who that is. I've probably talked about them before, and it was like 500 grand. And 500 grand was a really amazing amount of money for two people. It's like you could just do the work and take that 500 grand, split it in two, and it's a pretty great contract. And they basically could do all the work and not really end up working that much with that $500,000 contract. That's how 3D Marketing got started. That's my agency. And I was not a founder. I came in a little bit later into the picture, 2005, 2006-ish. Anyways, so they started this contract. They had this contract, and they basically, they had a few thoughts. One was they could outsource the labor and just, instead of getting paid $250,000 each, they could get paid $200,000 each and then have two really inexpensive kids out of college that they worked with. Or they could go and they could try to build out a full company. And they could use that as their anchor client, and they could go out and try to build $1 million business or a multi-million-dollar business. And so they had all these options on the table with what they could do. The easy short-term one is to take as much money as you can get out the table. And that's a good temptation, but they didn't give in to that. And they actually did hire my best friend from college, my roommate at the time. His name was Brandon. They hired him as the cheap college kid just out of college to be their cheap labor. And then they hired another guy who's one of the business partners now. His name is Scott. They hired those two, less than 100 grand, and had them go to work on trying to fulfill this client work. And then they also tried to build out a full agency. And so that's exactly what they did. Is they could have outsourced the work and done it one way. They could have hired employees. That's really like a first consideration you make, is like, do you outsource it? Do you send this labor over to, and this is 2003, 2004. This is before Upwork. Elance, I think, existed, but before the contractor or online like communities of labor outsourcing were really taking off. They just didn't want to go through the effort of outsourcing, so they decided to hire employees and to mold those employees into what you want. But nowadays, you could outsource that as long as you have the process in place, as long as you have the definitions that you need in order to say, here's what you're doing, here's what we are outsourcing, and here's the labor or the steps that need to be done. And so they made a choice between hiring those people and crafting that talent internally, or they could have outsourced it to either a consulting shop, like a US-based one that was probably pretty expensive. They could have gone and they could have tried to find somebody in India or another place, but that was so early in the beginning of this that I don't think those marketplaces really existed, or it would have been a full-time job just coordinating that labor. The other consideration is whether their contract even allowed them to outsource. So, this is obviously a 2002, 2003 timeframe, or four, whatever, somewhere in those 3 years. What can you do now? I think you have to decide, if you get a fat contract, do you want to outsource it and take a percentage of what you make? Say that it's $500,000. Do you want to spend $100,000 outsourcing it? And you'd probably get a lot of full-time people for that amount of money. You could, outside of the major expensive labor markets, if you outsource to a third tier labor market, you could probably get 5 to 10 people working full-time for that amount of money. Could you get the job done and then have the extra 400,000 sitting along, either just to just take a check, manage your clients, or do you reinvest it in your business? What are your aspirations in business? I think that the choices you make depend on all those questions, right? So there's no right or wrong answers as to whether or not you should outsource and when you should outsource. It comes down to what type of business do you want to run? Do you want to have a business that is like a cash cow, where you're just trying to take as much cash out of the business as possible until your hand is forced, meaning until you lose that contract, or until something goes away and you don't really spend any time on business development? You don't try to expand. You just milk that for all it's worth. That's like a typical consultant contractor type arrangement, and they'll just do that until it expires, and then they'll go and look for work. And sometimes that looking for work can be a couple years process to get to that point. So that's one option that you have, that people do in this situation. The other one is they say, okay, well, I'm going to take this anchor client and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to build a real business. I'm going to build, and I say real business, I mean, one contract is not, and some of you are going to get really mad at me on this one. You might get mad at me, but I'd say having one big fat contract is not the same as building like a sustainable long-term business. And you can argue with me on that if you want to, but that's sort of how, that's essentially how you can look at it as like, do you want to build a business that might be around 10 years from now, 3Deep is still, it still exists, or do you want to be in a business that is, that could leave once that contract is done? And I've seen a lot of people who had big fat contracts who are gone from the consulting business because they couldn't last for more than one cycle because they didn't have any business development. They didn't have any of the stuff that we talk about in the course. And so what they decided to do was to, instead of outsourcing to contractors and whatever, they decided to build out a company. They focused on business development to try to bring in new contracts in addition to that first $500,000 one. They did employee development for Scott and Brandon, and even themselves, really, because they were learning a new industry as they were going through this thing. And they worked their butts off, and it took about 3 years, and then they doubled it to about $1 million. And that was right around the time that I came in. And I started working as a contractor for 3Deep in 2005. And then by 2008, I joined as a partner. So I was a business partner of theirs, and I still am. And we went from $1 million. It took 5 years to get to that first $1 million from 500,000, which it's just how businesses work. Even if you have a fat contract, you still need to figure out how your business works. Then from 2008 until 2013, when I left, we went from 1 million to 7 million because we had things figured out and we were going through all these things. And when I say when I left, it was when I left the day-to-day role. So I decided to really focus more on education and the things that I'm passionate about right now, and focus less on my day-to-day role at 3D, but I'm still an owner in that company. And so so basically this is the long way of saying you have a choice. Do you outsource? You can outsource. If it's purely a money savings thing, so you can go do other stuff, that's cool. If it's money saving, so you can just take the cash, that's acceptable. It's probably not what we're teaching in this course. If you want to spend a little bit more money to have in-house resources because your contract either prevents you from using outsourced resources, or because you want to build a foundation where you can take on more clients and you can continue to grow the business, that is the best choice. And so contractors will only get you so far. And if you want to build a profitable business in the long term, then you're going to want to take the employee route. And so I think you just need to figure out what the business, what the projection is for your business and what you want to be. And so that's really the choice you need to make. Do you want to have intellectual capital stored within your organization, or do you want to pay to play every time that you use somebody's services, AKA use contractors? And I think that the difference really is that I'm fine in my business. I outsource things when there's situations, for example, that are easy to knock down. So I outsource graphic design because it's not an everyday consistent thing. But strategy and things where you really need to understand the business and the prospect, those are more people that are long-term, that are sticking around long-term. They're not the same as a outsourced one-off project. And so you need to bucket your contractors in that way as well. So I'm reading a lot into this question, Ricardo, because there is just basically what is my approach to outsourcing at the beginning. And I thought that a story might help, but hopefully that helps you out a little bit. And like I said, I don't see you on the chat right now. So I'm guessing that you'll just pick this up in the replay. I see Scott has a question I'm going to address, and I'm going to get to your questions in there. Scott said that this is his first time hearing my 3Deep story. How did two guys with no experience earn a $500,000 client? Yes. So it's a very lucky break. So they were both salespeople for Oracle until 2001, when the entire tech industry crashed. And so then they basically, everybody who was selling the Y2K switches, well, that's basically upgrading enterprise systems or upgrading your mainframes to an ERP, which can handle the Y2K. There's no bug in it. Once that was done, then they decided to go somewhere else. They went to this company called Epiphany. Epiphany is a CRM database. It was basically like Oracle. I think it was by some former Oracle people who created it. It was basically Oracle, but for customer relationship management. They worked for Epiphany as salespeople, and then I think one day Epiphany laid off everybody in the company. I think this is like 2001, 2002. And then when that happened, Dave, one of the founders, took on a job working as a consultant implementing the Epiphany system, and that his client that he was working on was this one that was there, and they fired his his parent company that was doing it, Hallmark. Hallmark was implementing Epiphany for this other company. And they said, Dave, can you do this? And he said, sure. And so him and Dan, my other co-founder of 3Deep, they signed a contract. They flew to LA and signed a contract with this company and had no idea what they were even delivering on. They just both were like, well, we just got laid off and this thing is not going well. We're just going to put together some kind of contract. And the reason why they landed is because they have enterprise sales experience. They're enterprise salespeople, and that allowed them to know how to write a contract, know how to have the confidence in sealing a deal. And actually 500,000 was not much from what they had been selling at Oracle. They had been selling $50 to $100 million worth of software each year. So that's a little bit of a background, maybe combined 50 to 100 million. I'd have to ask them the exact numbers there. And so that's how they got fortunate in that case. And also, I mean, a lot of the sales stuff that I teach in agency course are the things that I learned from Dave and Dan because they had the enterprise sales experience. And you don't really see many agencies that have that knowledge or that experience. And so I wanted to share with you the things that I learned from them as well. So you might have seen references to them in the course as well. Cool. Hopefully that's helpful for everybody. I'm going to get into the questions now. Jan says, you sent info about a live event, the Agency Summit. Will I share more? Yeah, so just in a nutshell, I find that obviously the online learning is great, like pre-recorded videos and these coaching calls and everything. But sometimes, and this is something that I say about conferences all the time, is that sometimes you can't match the in-person experience. The hallway conversations you have, the anecdotes, the asking questions that are off the record, and just getting to know other people and sharing those experiences. Sometimes I think that can be even more valuable than anything we can do online. And obviously online though, because we are all focused on our businesses and we're doing what we're doing, online is the thing that we can do all year round, and we can do it at our own pace. And then these in-person things, I think, just cement what we learned and allow us to form better relationships and to come to conclusions faster. And so I've been thinking for a while that I'd like to get people together and talk about this because it's been really beneficial for me. A lot of the things that I've learned as an entrepreneur have been through those hallway conversations. And so I'm exploring the idea of having people come out to Minneapolis and doing an agency summit. And I want to keep it limited. I want to keep it exclusive for the people who really, really want to go and do this thing. But I sent out a survey earlier today, about an hour and a half ago, asking if you, one, liked the course. And if you did like the course, I had some logic in there. If you didn't like it, then I didn't invite you to the summit. No offense, but you didn't get invited. But if you did like the course and it was working out for you, then what I did was I asked you some questions about what you'd like to see inside of that course. And so we're still collecting data, but my hope is that if we can get enough interest, then I will organize an event in Minnesota. I have some dates picked. I have a venue picked. You're committed and everything like that. It's more of, do we have enough people who are interested and who want to come and work on their business in person? And so I would love it if you wanted to do this. If this sounds interesting and you didn't see the survey invite, check your email or your spam folder, whatever it is, and just see if this is interesting to you. And you can get all the scoop just by going to the would you recommend agency course. If you select 7 through 10, then I'll invite you to the summit. If you didn't select, if you selected something below that, then you won't be asked those questions because it doesn't sound like you'd be a good fit to go to the summit. So hopefully that's helpful. And I would love to see you all there. I know that this is the first time doing it. So I'm doing it on home turf, meaning I'm doing it in Minnesota, a place where I teach actually at the school where I started all this, the school where I started my entire teaching business back in 2010, 2011. That's where we're going to hold the first agency summit. And so it's a cool venue. I'm very familiar with it. It's in a cool area of Minneapolis. And so it'd be great. But I know that those of you who are on this call, a lot of you are in Europe right now or different parts of the US or maybe in Australia and New Zealand. There's people all over the world that are taking the course. It might not be convenient for you. And so I want to get this first one under our belt, get some learnings, figure out if it works and if people want it. And then what we'll do is we'll start taking it on the road and maybe doing in a central location in Europe, depending on what people are interested in. Or if you want to come to Minnesota, I would love it because it's the best time to be in Minnesota. It's about 75 degrees, Fahrenheit, 76, 25 degrees Celsius. Can't beat it. All kinds of cool stuff. So if you're interested in that, check out the survey, and I'd love to have you there, or at least answer your questions you might have about it. Thanks for bringing that up, Jan. I appreciate that. Mark says, do you have any advice on how many emails we should include in an initial inbound email sequence and how we should space these out? One every day for 5 days, one every 2 to 3, etc. Yeah, Mark, I think there's so many different approaches to cold outbound or inbound. Wait, you say inbound. Are you saying, Mark, can you clarify, do you mean when you say inbound, that means that somebody's basically giving you their email address and then you're doing a drip campaign? That's what I'd call that, versus an outbound where you're collecting an email or you're reaching out to somebody. Which one are you doing? So you're saying on a drip campaign. I think that you have more leeway with dripping people who have opted in than you do with cold outreach where they have no relationship with you. And so you can do it at whatever pace works. Traditionally speaking, and I do a lot of these, if you give me your email address, then we give you different types of campaigns. The agency and PPC course email address immediately puts you into a free mini course, and that mini course has 4 emails, and they're basically going out every single day. But if you click on the email, it sends it to you even sooner. So it's self-paced, but it's at least once every day. Versus agency course, I think if you sign up right now, you get the agency Sage every Friday, and that's it. And that's probably a mistake to only do it that little, but we have only so many resources. So we are now starting to work on onboarding for agency course, or the agency list if you join the wait list. So that's one, that basically I would say that if they opt in, once a day is fine, but you want to pay attention to your metrics. Now, traditionally, almost everything that I have, at least in my email account or my mailing account, is that the open rates are significantly higher on email 1 than they are on email number 6. No doubt about it. Like you might get 75% on email number 1, and then by email number 6, it might go down to 30%. And so you're going to have some drop-offs, like significant, from people. They're either going to put you into a rule where you go into a folder, or you get stuck in the promotions tab. There's all these, it's just known that people start to go away. So you could do things like behavior-based, like if they're engaged, you could send it out. If they're not engaged, if they're not even opening it, you can delay longer. That's where marketing automation can be so nice, because everybody's different. Some people are really gung-ho and they want everything you can do. And that's where self-pacing it, so they can go ahead and look at all your emails and everything, is a good way to go. And then there's the people who they were happy in the first email, but then they just don't want to think about it, or life happens. I don't know about you, but I think I get a lot of emails when life happens. And those ones, no matter how good that email is, I'm more likely to unsubscribe. I'm more likely to delete them, set up a rule, whatever it is, just to get out of there, because it has nothing to do with them. They just sent me an email at an inopportune time, versus when I'm not stressed out or when things are going all okay, then I'm more likely to either read the email or potentially respond. And so I think that there's no way for you to know that as the mailer, other than to look at the data that is supported. Like, are you getting more unsubscribes at certain times a day, certain times a week? What's working and what's not working? And then once you figure that out, try to be consistent with it. That's the other thing, is I try to make sure that my newsletters are consistent. They're not always consistent, but the Sage one, I committed to sending out that email every Friday in May of 2017. And I have. Every single Friday, people have gotten an email from me doing that. And I think that it's been helpful because people look forward to it and they anticipate it. But has it dropped off and have people become fatigued by it? Potentially, yeah. I mean, once you have an email in your inbox and you miss the first one, and then the second one comes and the third one comes, suddenly you're at the point where, then they just ignore everything, or they get overwhelmed. And so you need to fresh start it, or you need to give them something else to talk about. But you don't really know what's on their end without asking them, or without having some kind of story you're telling. Part of the reason why I like to send out surveys, I just executed a survey for you guys on agency course, and then I just did one on PPC course last week. It's that I get to know the reason behind these things. And not everybody responds, not everybody tells you everything, but it is helpful to see that information. And so I would definitely recommend that approach on your end as well. Hopefully that helps, Mark. All right, Marco, we're going to get into yours now. Okay. Marco, so sorry to be confusing. I was typing a bit too fast. You go. I see. So Marco says that particularly on my analytics course, if somebody were to buy it, there's no price on the homepage. You have to click on like read more, learn more. And is that strategic, or why would you do that? It's so the reason why for that particular course and for other ones is that I've been, I mean, I can tell you my experience with selling online courses and how it's been in the past, and why I've made the decisions we've made. Not every decision is like a conscious, like perfect decision. Sometimes it's just like, okay, I guess this is what we're going to do. Or it's like this decision by consensus, or a decision by, what's the word where you're just like indifference, I guess. Decision by indifference. But what I found is that for my PPC and analytics course, if you put the whole thing on the homepage and ask somebody to buy an expensive product, their likelihood of buying it is zero. Even if you have a great landing page or a great homepage, it's not likely to happen, because ultimately people are not ready to pay that much without having proven that it's worth it. And if it's their first interaction, usually people belabor a decision over time. And so you don't want to, I say you don't want to try to get a home run on the first date, at least in that area. The same thing with agency course. Now, it's not even available for sale, but if it were to be available for sale on the homepage and I put the price on there, I think we'd have fewer people buy it than if we saved up all the demand for a launch or for a shortened window when it's available. And in a cohort like you're in, a cohort that goes through the course and learns and works on their business. And so that's the reason why, is because I'd rather have somebody give me their email address and then earn trust with me than to try and get a home run on the first date, to try really hard to seal the deal. And it is analytics driven. Basically, if you look at if you look at my homepage, and this is obviously because there's so many students, if you don't segment out students, and actually I just did this segmentation, it's in one of my upcoming 90-day challenge videos, about 70% of people who visit any of my course websites are students or people who click through on an email. So I've already captured their email and they've already gotten the sales pitch. And only 30% of people who come in are my actual marketing audience. And so if you come to my site, I wouldn't consider you to be part of my marketing audience, and my conversion rate would be very low comparatively speaking. And so turns out that for my marketing audience, the opt-in rate is about, the marketing audience is 10 to 30 times higher, the opt-in rate, than my non-marketing audience. Of course, some people slip through the cracks in the non-marketing audience, like they can still convert even though we have their email address or they're populated one way. They might give a different email. There's all kinds of different reasons why there might be some anomalies there. But basically, I did this because in analyzing my marketing versus my non-marketing audience, it turns out that most people who come to the homepage aren't looking to buy right away. They're looking to get into their account. So why put any friction in place to get them out of the way? And then why try to keep on forcing it down somebody's throat when they go to log into the product they've already purchased, that it's for sale? And then also it does eliminate your ability to do any kind of flexible pricing or different offers, different opportunities out there if you're putting your price right on the homepage. And so this way, if you go to a product page and you have people go through it more of like a tour, it just makes them take an extra step. And the people who take that step are usually part of your marketing audience, and it just gets them further down the funnel, closer to where you're going. And so I don't know if it's a perfect answer, Marco. I don't know if that's a perfect way to divide up your website, but I would think about it that way for anything, not just my websites, but for an agency website as well. Who's coming to your site? At 3Deep, the major people who came to our website were job seekers. Our number one most trafficked page, hands down, was our jobs section. All of our jobs. So it's like, okay, well, do you factor them into your conversion rate? Is that a conversion or not? And so I think that one of the things that people don't do a very good job with analytics is they look at averages and they read into averages as if that really matters at all. The average conversion rate is not accurate. Maybe some people can convert, maybe some can't. So you need to do segmentation. You need to really understand who's going to your site as much as possible. And then you make decisions off of those people. And sometimes the decisions are that you're just going to segment and you're going to move people along into the area they should be in versus moving people along into areas that they never want to be, that they never should be. And so those are some decisions that I've made basically to say, for those people who are interested in the course, if they're really that interested, they're going to go to the product page and learn some more. And then the other advantage is stuff like tracking, like you said. We can see what their journey is a lot easier if they go to multiple pages and there's page views. If you do remarketing, you can remarket just to people who went to the product page. You can't even get to the product page if you've been cookied as a user before. The navigation actually doesn't even give you the option to go to the product page. So only non-logged in, non-cookie people can do that on these courses, at least in theory. Sometimes it doesn't work very well. So there's a lot of reasons for doing that. And actually, hopefully this is helpful for people. I mean, obviously this is really inside baseball to my business, not to your agency business, but you can, obviously connect the dots between what I'm talking about and how your business works. Think about segmentation. What are your segments? Who's going to your website and what are their interests? And how do you know if they're a potential person you want to market to or not? What can you do in order to get that to happen? Maybe on your business card, you send people to a page that's known to be only for prospects, right? So there's all kinds of different things you can do and you can work on. I think the more information you have, the better you can segment. The more information you ask for, the better you can know somebody's needs. But it's a stretch. It's a stretch to think that somebody, just because you have their email address and because they opted into something or they contacted you, that they're gonna give you their life story. Very much a stretch. And so I think it's different for an agency, trying to sell 5, 10, 20, $100,000 projects, 100,000 euro projects, whatever it is, whatever your currency of choice is, or trying to sell a $500 course or $1,000, whatever the price of the course is. There's going to be different ways that you're going to go about that. But I think the principles are the same, is that the more you know about somebody, the better off you're going to be. One of the things we have in development right now as part of the agency course umbrella is one about how do you prospect on LinkedIn? What messages do you put out there? How do you get in front of people? How do you segment doing, LinkedIn and outreach and talking to people? I think there's, maybe you worry less about your website, and maybe your website the only way people find it is either through a random search because of something you did in the past, or your blog, or maybe they come in only through your outbound activities. Maybe you just really get to be prolific on LinkedIn talking about stuff, and then that's how they discover you. That's actually been pretty good. LinkedIn's been good for the agency course list as well. Just people always want to befriend me on LinkedIn, and then I post stuff on there, and then that brings them to the site and they opt in. It's a big source of getting people to opt in to what we're doing. So maybe you use different channels in order to get people to your site. And then because of the channel that you posted on, that's going to have some kind of refer and some kind of data in your analytics. Then you can start to segment that way and say, okay, well, here's how people are coming in and finding us. And so I think the more information you have, the better you can segment, but it also creates like this vast number of permutations that you need to deal with. And that can be frustrating. I think it's so overwhelming to deal with permutations of like how many different marketing messages we have and segments and stuff like that, that sometimes we just don't do anything at all because we get so frustrated and so overwhelmed with what the possibilities. And so hopefully that helps a little bit. And yeah. Any other questions? Crickets. Yeah. No, I'll think about some questions to ask you guys then, and if you don't have any questions coming in. Okay, so my question, what I'm curious about, this is something I want to start doing for agency course as well, is outbound and just talking about just basically we all have these services that are really good, right? How do we tailor that to the person who could be receiving that service? And how do we make it so that they identify themselves as somebody who could use what we do? And I had mentioned we are developing this LinkedIn Jumpstart course where we basically go through an outreach process and strategy that you can use on LinkedIn in order to bring in, to create conversations and to bring in real leads with real money to spend. And it's funny because it's all about making it about that person, which is obvious, right? But like anybody who buys, it's all about them. And so the first thing is like you flatter the person that comes in, and the people who are very flattered, you flatter them and they start talking about themselves, and then it starts to come to the point where you can provide a solution for them based on their needs. So it's, instead of just coming up with like, I do this, I do SEO, I do whatever that is, it's more getting to know the person and then providing a solution that they need, assuming that's a solution that you can provide and can do. So that's one way to do it. I get a lot of cold outreach and it's just terrible. It's me, I actually I just look at them and then I highlight the words I or me, and it's like, hi, me, 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 me. And then there's no you, there's no like, here's what is in it for you, Jeff. And so that's generally my gauge as to what a good email is because if you ask somebody about themselves, they're much more likely to talk than if you just project what you are. So my question to you is anybody seen a good outreach email lately? Have you gotten an outreach that you're like, oh, this is good, or that you actually responded to? So I've gotten some really bad ones, and I can even find them for you, but I wanted to hear yours first. Good outreach, because we can find bad easily, right? I'll give you my most cringeworthy one right now then, since nobody's pep stuff. Yeah. This is uncensored. I didn't blur it out, but what do you think about this one? If you get a LinkedIn message that says this, what do you think is going to happen? They want to do a Skype call with me and they can't put their own face on there. I was actually wondering, Zach, if this is you, because you're in this general area, or if this is somebody you know that was reaching out. But I was just amazed by this one. It was actually it was so like cringeworthy. That was a little bit intriguing as to like, why am I a straight shooting person, and how do we, what are his money making ideas? I sort of saw right through it, but just curious as to what you think about that, or if you found any good ones. Now Scott's asking a question though, so if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, so let me see. Okay, so Scott says, my challenge is trying to modify my service offerings to find a better combination of work needed for results and the revenue profit of that. I want badly to get out of AdWords, but I struggle to find replacement package. I also struggle to find people who are qualified, skilled, and have integrity to work with my clients. Okay, so Scott, I know you work in I have your books right over on the shelf over there, and you're well known for AdWords in your industry and have been for a while. I think it's construction, I want to say, or aspect of it, home improvement. The thing is that I think the hard part that I see in your business, Scott, roofer contractor marketing. Okay. The thing that I think the problem that I see right now and this is going to be blunt. You're probably going to get annoyed by this, but that's okay. This is what we need to do, right? Is that the business model that you were successful in and that worked for you has changed. And I don't think it sounds like it's going to be really difficult to keep that model of what you're known for and the same business model. Something has to change pretty significantly in order for it to work. And so I would almost look at it from, do you want to stay in the industry or do you want to stay in the business line? And the business line being AdWords. And so I think that sticking with AdWords, what it means is that the AdWords game has changed. It's a lot more expensive per click. There's more competition. Google's profits are higher than ever. Google made $110 billion in 2017, up from $90 billion in 2016. So they made a $20 billion increase by charging more in clicks. By basically, the number of searchers hasn't really gone up that much over the last several years. Like, it's pretty flat on desktop. There's more mobile, obviously, but even that gets eaten a little bit by the decline in desktop or the flat growth in desktop. And so Google is, how'd they squeeze $20 billion? That's like a lot of money. That's a lot of money. I mean, 20 billion on top of 90. Like, what's 20 into 90? It's about 22% or something like that. They had a 22% increase. Where did that come from? It's from their users. It's 22% on the same amount of traffic volume. That means that you're paying 22% more for AdWords. And the year before that, you're paying 15% more. And the year before that, you're paying 10% more. And eventually, it gets to the point where they squeeze out the profit potential. They squeeze out the inefficiency in the market, and it becomes super efficient for Google and not always for our businesses. And it depends on the business, but some businesses still think that Google is a really amazing investment, and some think that some temper their expectations. Now, I love Google AdWords, and I fully contend, and obviously a lot of you have taken my course, that if you are managing it every day and you are getting in there and doing all the things that you need to do, which is being very efficient, not paying too much, managing your bids, turning on ads and turning off ads, all the stuff that I preach, you will be profitable in AdWords pretty much no matter what, even in the face of competition. The thing is that we're all business owners. We're not all trying to be technicians. And so Scott could probably turn around one or two clients and make them profitable using these techniques, but you want to run a business. You don't want to be the one who's just constantly working on, you can't be in the weeds. And so you want to hire somebody to be in the weeds and have them take it over. And of course, hiring somebody to be in the weeds isn't really working that great, right? It's not really working to the point where it's giving you the results that you want. And customers are starting to not want to work with you, or you're losing clients because the business model is changing. So I think that between the two of whether you should stick in home improvement or you should stick with AdWords, I think that it's going to be harder to run an AdWords agency without, in a specific niche. If it can be harder as prices go up, or essentially the whole industry is going to be facing a lot of difficulties because there's more competition and it's more expensive. And so that business model it might be on borrowed time. I'm not positive. I think that, the counterpoint to that would be that, well, they still are going to be advertising on AdWords. They're just not going to be as profitable, and they still need an agency. The other thing is, okay, well, if there's inefficiency in AdWords, where are they going to? They're not going back to the yellow pages. They're not going back to 800 numbers. Maybe they are. Like, what are they doing? Are they advertising more on TV? Where's the slack in the market? Because ultimately, people go where there's a need and where they're seeing opportunities. So what's the new thing? Is it Houzz? What are people advertising on that gets them more leads now? And what's the cheap source of leads? Is it, it's probably not, is it SEO? Is it PPC? What is it? Is it Facebook? So I think that you need to do more of a market analysis as to what this market needs from an advertising perspective, and then see if you can play in that area. And it might be beyond your expertise comfort zone. It might be beyond your comfort zone in like where you've made your mark and what your books are talking about. But that's okay. I mean, you need to make adjustments because it seems like the AdWords train is getting more difficult. It's speeding up, and people are going to get left behind on it because it's so expensive. And so You could be a niche AdWords player and temper your ambitions for expansion and just find somebody who's a great manager who just wants to be in there every day, giving the results that they can get. Or you can try to round out your offerings by bringing up something else and looking at where the market's going. And I think that's the thing is like, the whole Wayne Gretzky, don't skate to the puck, skate to where the puck is going. I think that's a good thing to look at here. Where is it going? I know I haven't done research on this particular industry, the future of it in a couple of years, but where is it? Where is it going? And what are people going to do? Because that's what people can really be the most effective with. Scott, I'm just reading this now. Okay. Google My Business plus organic SEO, but the angle for lead generation. And then Google's moving towards AI, and it'll make most users who have budgets below 10K and force them to use AdWords Express. I could see that potentially happening, but I'm not sure that. I don't think that Google's. I don't know. I haven't researched this closely enough to have a strong opinion, but it seems to me like Google, they're going to make the most money by getting their big spenders to spend more money, not by squeezing out all the small players. But I could be wrong. I think that they've tapped into most small businesses at this point. I don't think they see that as a room for growth. It's getting their big advertisers to spend more. That's what they want to do. And that's where their ad reps are and what they're putting into. So I could see them trying to take over under 10K accounts and giving them less control or making them do AdWords Express. But I think that, well, they've been doing that forever though. AdWords Express has always been the default option. And so I don't know. I think they're already making that effort. I don't think it's going to be a switch where you can't use the old AdWords anymore. That won't happen, in my opinion. Kenneth says Facebook Messenger chatbots. Yeah, Kenneth and I have been talking about that. It sounds like there's a lot of people who are getting really cheap leads from Facebook Messenger and chatbots. And can you create one? And can it work, right? So I like that a lot. Jan says, are you in touch with Tiago Forte? I love the way he communicates via email. So yeah, I've talked to Tiago. Jan, you recommended him to me. And I don't know if I'm on his email list or not, but I do love to see when people communicate effectively through email, because I think that's always an inspiring thing to see. And so Sven saying Neville is another one who does a good job with his emails. Funny, the Neville guy, I signed up for his course a while ago, and his first email says, tell me your biggest question. I read and respond to every email. And then I responded to him and he never responded. So I unsubscribed. So I'm no longer on his list. Funny how that works. If I missed your question, put it in the actual Q&A thing. I'm going to look at Marcel now. Marcel says, regarding your email question, I hate when somebody wants to connect with me via LinkedIn, I accept, and then just some minutes later, he sends me a message selling whatever. I think the best way to approach it is sponsored content that matters to your ideal customer profile. First, give something, then start talking. Yes. I couldn't agree more. Like it's so easy to tell when somebody's going to spam you. Like it's obvious. Like they're just, it's like there's this like caged dog who's just like barking at you. And you're like, maybe this dog's harmless. Maybe it's just like a nice little puppy. And then it's always exactly what you think it's going to be. You never want that, right? And so my general rule is if they don't have a picture in their profile, I don't accept. If they put something that says like, we're in the same industry, blah, 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 something generic, I usually don't accept. Or if I accept and then they email me, I just delete them and then I report them as spam. That's my thing. Like, come on, do better. The thing is, they're taking a good idea, something that might have worked, and then they're just like, they're outsourcing it or they're having somebody do it. And that person doesn't understand the nuance as to what a conversation is. They don't understand the nuance of building a relationship. And frankly, a relationship is not built overnight. And this is going back to why don't I have prices on the homepage, or why do I move things around? Because I think that I have a lot of evidence that points to people not really being ready for something to pay money. Very rarely are they ready to pay money for something right when they first get the relationship. So you need to build that relationship. You need to build trust. You need to build out that opportunity. And that's worked for me. And I might be leaving some money on the table, but I feel good about it. And that's another acceptable thing, just so you know, in business. It's acceptable to not maximize every single dollar or euro, whatever your currency is. It's acceptable to not try and get every single one of those units from day one and to maximize. Like, I feel like if you maximize revenue in year one, you're potentially you're selling yourself short in year two, versus if you can ramp up a business and you can build a good foundation on trust, you're going to have that foundation. So next year it's actually easier to make money. It's a lot easier if you make $1 million this year, it's a lot easier to make 1.5 million next year if you start at $1 million next year. If you make $1 million this year and then you're starting at zero, what's harder, to get the extra 500,000 when you already have $1 million guaranteed, or to get another $1 million? Way harder to get the $1 million. And also, you play differently because you're playing scared because you need to get that. And so, yes, you might be desperate, but when you know that a certain amount's there, you can make more long-term investment decisions. And how does this relate to emails? I don't know exactly, but it's just how my overall sentiment to business building. It's what I think makes a business effective is building a brand, building something people can trust and that they know about, and that it's there for years to come. People still talk about my tenure at 3Deep, and I haven't had a day-to-day role for almost 5 years now. 4.5 years ago, I left my day-to-day role, and people still bring up, Jeff, that's the 3Deep guy. Like that's what building a brand is. Jan says, I don't accept invites from anybody on LinkedIn except when I know them. They make a good case that we should connect. 3, they seem very interested person to be connected to. Unsure if this is a good approach, but I'd rather have a small network of interesting people than a huge network of who is this again? Yeah, I think it depends on your objective. Like my objective, generally speaking, my objective has been to maximize my reach. And so if somebody connects with me and then they can see the posts that I put out there and the content, then it's one more potential eyeball, versus like if they send me an annoying message, I can just delete them out or I can just ignore it. And so usually I just look at it from that perspective. But I think if you're not trying to sell something, or if you're not wanting to be sold, then if it's the wrong audience, they're not relevant, they're not a potential client, then yeah, what's the point of connecting with them? So I think you can do it any way you want to. And I like your approach. I don't think that it's a wrong approach by any means. How are we doing, everybody? Are we all programming Facebook chat bots? Is that what your problem? Is that why we're not being very talkative today? Oh, Marco has a question in the QA. Okay, cool. Can we have a little brainstorm with the group about where everybody thinks the market is going, or the things that are on fire in their country? I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts from their particular market. I think that'd be fantastic. Does anybody have is there anything that you see as the future? So I'll start us off while you guys are thinking about your answers. Okay, Marco's already put his answer in there. So I have this friend, Miles Beckler, who I follow and we've become friends recently. I think some of you follow him as well. And he keeps on harping on how the cost of Facebook ads is imminently going to be so expensive that it's going to drive people out of the market. Because honestly, it's going to get to Google, because Facebook wants to make their profits. Facebook has whatever they have, but they're basically going to try to make as much money as they can. And they're going to raise prices significantly, arbitrarily. They're going to make it way more expensive to advertise on their platform. And so for a long time, I've always said, if you can't afford Google, look into Facebook. And now it's going to be like, if you can't afford Google and Facebook, what do you look into? And I think chatbots is sort of like an inefficiency in the marketplace. And that means that if they're trying to push it out and they're doing these things, or if it's more lightweight, or if it's maximizing, or if it's taking their inventory that's unused and they're doing something, or if they're trying to push a new format, that'll be an inefficiency you can exploit in the market for a lot of profit. But usually it's not a long-term thing. Usually any inefficiency gets closed if it works too well. So that's one thing we can do. As far as major platforms go, I'd love to hear what you guys think about what the next major platform is going to be. Is it Twitter? Are they finally going to be a third viable network? Is it something else? Very curious about that one too. Marco says in the Netherlands, it's conversion optimization, Google Analytics, automated personalization of websites. Yeah, personalization's been around forever. That's what this Epiphany company did back in 2000 and 2001. But now it's like starting to get to the point where the technology and the market have caught up. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I don't know. Yeah, I'd like to see some case studies on it and everything. Small businesses want it. I think there's definitely an advantage to segmentation, as I was talking about earlier. The better we can segment our traffic, the better we can do. You said the abtasty.com? Is that, and that's a personalization platform? The one that I'm somewhat familiar with is Right Message. It's a brand new one, Brennan Dunn's company. Cool. I'll take a look at this. I can tell already that's going to be in Dutch. Oh, conversion optimization is pretty much the same word, so that's cool. All right. Oh yeah, Rand Fishkin just left Moz and now he's doing influencer marketing at SparkToro. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. That's been exciting me lately. I don't really know what to do about it, but just reading everything that BuzzSumo puts out there and how people share content and how they interact with it and how expert roundup posts are sort of dying. But then if you do more advanced expert roundups, that might be effective, or there's all kinds of different tactics that are out there. I think it all comes down to, again, this is an existential question that we have as consultants and as service providers is like, okay, well, I was an AdWords guy and I've been able to ride the AdWords platform for over a decade. But then we have stuff like a chatbot or outreach. And like, that's something like influencer outreach was like a breakthrough in 2013 or 2014. And now it's like dead or quote unquote dead, like everything dies, So it's like, okay, well, what's the, like that, is that something? It's almost like tactics are always going to be on a 2 to 3 year cycle, like on an up and down cycle. And then it's the networks that are the ones that have like the long-term value. And I think the biggest thing is like predicting what the next network is going to be, or doubling down on the existing networks. I think that's the thing. So B2B networking on LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn I think is, actually, for all of us, LinkedIn is probably the platform that we are sleeping on. That's why I'm so excited that we're developing a LinkedIn course right now about how do you outreach and how do you nurture leads to generate business on LinkedIn. I think that's the outspoken one, because you're always going to be able to. I mean, they're straight up promoting tools to help you do that. It gives them credibility in their network. It works even better if they let people use it for a business generator. So I think that's a good opportunity. Jan, I don't know what BAT is. I know what the Ethereum blockchain is. What is BAT? Oh, basic attention. Oh, I know. Yeah. That's the. There's a bunch of blockchain stuff that's out there. Yes, these advertising items that are out there. It'll be interesting to see how that happens. I don't know if I can read enough on it to not make this boring, Jan. So I'll take it offline with you. But that's interesting. Everybody else wants to read that. Go for it. Marcel has a question. I wonder if you would like to build an agency again. Why or why not Do you recommend the experience? I'm just starting in this agency adventure. So working on my agency was a life-changing experience. It meant so much to me, and I gave it everything I had for a long time. The longest I've done anything was building up that business, and it's still, I'm still part of the business, but not working on it every day. And so I highly recommend it. And that's why I created the course. Obviously it did everything for me. It created personal opportunity. It created a lot of confidence. I got to experience a lot of different client situations and deal with them. My problem solving skills improved. I developed talent, meaning I help people get better at what they were doing. We hired employees. We contributed to the local economy. Just so much good. We got these awards. We had a cool office space. We got to do team building exercises and play games and gave employees bonuses. We made money. I got to fly all over the country in the US and deliver sales presentations and feel like a big deal. All kinds of cool stuff. And I wouldn't trade that in for anything in the world. But I think that my big thing, and I just wrote about this last week, or maybe, I think it was last week, but biggest thing was I kept on going through cycles with bringing on new clients and trying to get them to get to a certain level of elevation where they could execute on these programs and they could really take advantage of all the techniques that were available and really play around with or implement the things that we talked to them about. And I feel like going through that cycle over and over again and not feeling like you're making progress can bring you down. And so I think that's the hard part, is that when you have momentum, it just feels amazing. But then if you lose the momentum, or if you start focusing on other things, then it gets tough to redo that, to start over again. And so when you're always bringing in new clients, when you're always having to start over new employees, all that stuff, it can wear on you. And I got burnt out for a while. Would I do it again? The cool thing is, the reason why I'm so gung-ho on what I'm doing here at Jefflytics and this course and helping you guys out and helping other people out, is that I feel like I can reach a lot more people. We've had over 10,000 people enroll in our courses online. And when I worked for my clients, I was helping big companies, but I was helping 10 people do better in their job. And so the scale of this is much more exciting to me right now than making a big impact for fewer people. I'm making a somewhat big impact for a lot of people as a result of doing this. So I want to see this thing through. The other thing is I know I can always go back and handle clients. I still have clients. I still work with people and do everything that we talk about in agency course. I just get to do it on my own terms as a consultant, and as opposed to an agency where you have a staff and an office and everything you need to get that going. And also lifestyle wise, since I've been living out of a suitcase for the last 3 years, it's a lot easier to do this type of business than that one. So I don't know. I might go back to it at some point. I know that if I did it again, it would be amazing. I probably won't start a business from scratch. I'd probably take over or, buy into somebody else's business or take over a business that exists and then apply my special skills to it in order to make it a better opportunity, a better business. But I would never say never, but I don't know. I'm riding this thing out right now. I'm riding out teaching people and empowering businesses how to, teaching individuals and businesses how to run better businesses and how to make the whole overall digital marketing world better. That's what I'm doing. And I can see myself doing this indefinitely. So I don't know if it's an either or thing. Once this chapter, if this thing breaks down, then maybe I go back to, if there's a reason for it. And if I stall out on progress, then I will do something else. I'm not going to just stop doing stuff. I can say definitively, Marcel and everybody, that it was the best decision I ever made. Hands down, was to build a business, was to work with people, to do everything we did. I'm still satisfied by it. It's still like a lifetime achievement, and I did it all in like before I was 35 years old. It's amazing. And the lives you impact is amazing. Like you have people who like you pluck out of college and then they suddenly become like a VP somewhere, or they're like working on startups, or they're doing all these different things because of the skills you taught them. Like, I don't know what other type of business can you take somebody's skill level from wherever it is and bring it and elevate them with you and make your company better and everything than you can do in the agency business, because they're getting so much exposure to so many different types of projects. They're getting internal exposure to a small business, which is helpful. They're just getting so much value, but it's not for everybody. And that's the thing, is as you expand, and instead of hiring one perfect employee, if you have to hire 5 because you're growing so much, then you might have that one perfect one and 4 that you're just okay with because you don't have the choice of, the pick of the litter anymore. So there's some stuff that happens as you grow that becomes difficult. My favorite time period was not at 50 employees. It was before that, well before then, my favorite time working at the agency. Biggest mistake we made was we didn't hire professional managers, middle management. We basically had we have 4 partners in the business, and we all had our own little area. And we didn't just say like, here's the CEO role and here's who's doing that. We basically said everybody's responsible for their part of the business, and you lose a lot of efficiencies of the scale when everybody has to do their own part of the business. What other questions you guys have? Another AdCoin, another one. Yeah, so I've seen AdCoin as well, blockchain technology. I was just listening to a podcast on this right before we got on this call, and like they're talking about Internet 3.0, right? So Internet 1.0 was the old school AOL dial-up internet type thing, and then it crashed. And then there's Internet 2.0, which is Flickr, the API world, web services, software as a service, all that stuff that came out of that. And now we're ending that mode with these 800-pound gorillas, a 4-horse race. When you call it a 4-horse race, Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook. And so then now it's like basically there's going to be a backlash against these giant networks. That's the thought, because as I just talked about, Facebook and Google are so freaking expensive to advertise on. Apple charges you 30% of your revenue if you have an app on their system, on their app store. Amazon makes a ton of money. Amazon actually makes more money fulfilling a product for you than they do selling it themselves, because of all the services they have on top of it. And that's the 4 horses we're dealing with, and they're disproportionately wealthy. They have more resources, employees, and everything. And I think that the consumer, not even the consumer, but the internet as a whole, is going to start saying, well, we gave too much control to these people. Internet 1.0 was about distributed control. Nobody owned it. The internet was free. And now there's 4 people who own the entire internet. They're lobbyists. They're the ones who are doing all these, they're doing everything. Like, you can't touch anything that isn't one of their products. Fortunately, Zoom is not one of their products, although my email is coming through Google right now. So you can't touch anything on the internet that's not controlled by these people, other than a very few handful of things. And those handful of things are either going to get consumed or they're going to not be a threat and whatever. So Internet 3.0, the blockchain basically is, let's go back to a distributed internet. Let's go back to an internet that's not controlled by the big players, the big funds. And let's basically use these tokens, or let's use some kind of new scheme in order to pay for this new technology. So instead of venture capital raising, you're raising funds through these token sales. And so you're basically selling these, I don't want to get into tokenization too much, but basically you're selling these little utility tokens that are allowed to run apps and things on these different blockchains and these different distributed ledgers. And I'm probably sounding like nonsense, but basically that if you believe in Internet 3.0 and you believe that there's going to be ways that we have everything going between here and there, if you believe that the in between of, if you believe that we're going to be not using Facebook and Google as much, we're going to have some kind of way that you're going to be able to advertise on your own website just by plugging in some kind of code, and it's going to be a third-party system, and it's going to reach that, and that people are going to rebel. They're going to say, we don't need to be on YouTube, we're going to monetize ourselves. Or if we don't need to do this, we're going to do this instead. Then you should pay attention to how the future is going to be. Now, I think it's hard for me to say when it's going to be and whether you should drop everything and do it, or if you should be a cautious observer and sit on the sidelines until these things take over. I have not dropped everything and done these platforms, even though I'm very interested in it. So a lot of my hobby time is spent listening to these things and just paying attention to it as much as I can. But maybe, I don't know, I've met people who have dropped everything and gone into the blockchain and gone into these things. I think what's going to end up happening is, the problem with it is that, see that you both, just like Jan and Marco, put in two different utility tokens for advertising. Well, in the end, how many advertising players are going to win? Usually like there's an advertising platform that comes on, they get momentum, they do well, and then it gets sold to Google or Facebook. And then we start over again with a new one. And so it's like, okay, there's only so many ad networks that are going to work. There's only so many things that can get the momentum. And it's in the interest of these big players to buy out or to block out anybody that's there. So it has to be more than just like a movement like the blockchain. It has to be a full movement of everybody's efforts and concerns to say, I've had enough with this internet that's controlled by 4 players, and I want to go after this. I don't know. I mean, do we think consumers are smart enough to figure that out and to do it on their own? Do we think that tokenization is a thing? I mean, I don't know. What's the chances of this happening? I think that, one way that it was described to me, and this is not my advice at all, but one way that it was described to me is like, hey, Jeff, if you think there's a 10% chance that this is going to take over, then maybe you should spend 10% of your time concentrating on it, because then then when it's there, you'll be further ahead than everybody else. I think that might be a wise way to look at it. Now, 10% of your time is a lot of time still, but when we're talking about hobby time, essential reading, that might be a worthwhile thing, because we're talking about, most of us have internet businesses, and we're talking about the internet 3.0. It's going to happen. It's been 10 years since internet 2.0, and it was 10 years before that internet 1.0 came out. These things go in cycles, and it might be happening sooner than you think. Hopefully this isn't too conspiracy theorist to you guys. Hopefully you found this useful. I don't know if I'm losing you or not. So please let me know. Okay, Marco thought it was cool. I see Florian has a question. I mentioned partners. I see that agencies often 4 partners, 2 or 3, etc., but they are not founders. What does a partner deal look like, and is it a good growth for strategy? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at business partners. There's legal entities like a LLP, like a limited liability partnership. So partner is actually it is a term that I use loosely, but I shouldn't. My wife, the lawyer, tells me I shouldn't. But basically, a partner is a specific shareholder in a specific type of business, and that is a partnership, which is not the same as like a corporation. So just be clear on that. And so if I say partner, I'm not a partner in my business. I'm a principal, because I own shares in it. I'm basically an owner of a corporation. Now, what does that deal look like? I think I would recommend, if you want to study how to handle succession planning for your business, the best example is law firm and CPA firms, hands down. They've been doing it forever. Law firms, they put the names of the founding partners on there, and then they, the ones who actually work on it, they work their way up to partner, they buy in, they actually pay for shares in the company, and then they participate in parts of the profits that come into it. And that's the most pure form of what I think a partnership or this type of business should be. And they're the ones who have paved the way and set up things. And so, but that's not how mine was set up at all. I actually don't really want to get into my setup too much. I'm not sure that we can do it in one of our one-on-ones, Florian. But generally speaking, think about the sale event of your business. Say that you get burnt out 20, 30, 1 year from now, whatever the number is. Who's going to take over, and what is your business going to be worth? Do you want to sell parts of your business now on the way up when it's not worth as much, but potentially to your employees? Do you want to bring in outside investors, or do you want to maximize control, thinking that this is going to be worth more, and that at some point somebody's going to want to buy your business? Now, the reality is that most people think that their business is worth a lot more than it really is, and selling these businesses is hard because it's so reliant on the founder. So if you're a single founder and you're the one that the business relies on to run through, if you're the central point of everything, then the business might not be worth much at all in the open market, or at a significant discount. You might be able to sell your business for less than the revenue that you bring in every year. That's a reality that you might face if you don't get to that point. So you then need to get to the point where it's no longer reliant on you because you've hired a professional manager, somebody who's in between, who can handle day-to-day operations, and they're not buying you, they're buying a well-run business. Excuse me. Or you handle succession within, and you give your key employees an incentive to stick around by giving them some kind of equity or options to buy into the company. And I actually think that's the better situation for almost every agency business, unless you're in a high growth area that you think has a chance of selling. Generally, you'd want to follow the leads of the CPA and accounting firms and go that route. It's not going to be like, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs focus so much on a sale event, like selling the company or an exit. I don't think that an exit is really that. It's a mental barrier and a pride thing that you sold a company and that you made 6 figures or 7 figures or 8 figures, whatever that number is. But honestly, that's not the only way to make money. And what it does is it gives you a huge amount of money at one point in time, or some kind of buyout, and then you have to pay taxes on it. It might not be as advantageous. Having a business that you can run expenses through, that you can have write-offs with, that you can do all the advantages of being a business owner, which in the US, I can specifically talk about the US better than other markets, but it's a huge advantage to be a business owner in the US, like tremendous, especially under the current administration and the new tax policy. Being a business owner is a tremendous advantage. So giving that up and saying, okay, maybe say that you make $100,000 a year in profit now at a capital, and it's at a business tax bracket, or you sell that business for $1 million and you make $1 million in one lump sum. Would you rather have $100,000 at a lower tax rate over the next 10 years? And I said, it's actually not going to be, it'd be more like you make $200,000 in profit now and you sell it for $1 million. It's, a 3 to 5x profit factor that you're talking about. Would you rather have that money at a lower tax bracket and get it paid out and just keep on having that perpetual, like an annuity almost? Or do you want to get to that sale event and pay more in taxes, but then just be done with it? But then you probably have to start another business anyway in order to get your tax advantages, in order to do these things. That's why so many entrepreneurs don't stop at one. Like, they just keep on going because it's amazing. Owning a business is amazing, and that's what we all want to do. So hopefully that helps out a little bit. Let me know if you have any questions or follow-ups on that, Florian. Okay, so he says inside an agency. Okay, so is it a good idea to give your employees, is it a good growth strategy to give somebody an incentive or some kind of equity so they work harder? Sure. As long as you understand what you're giving up and what they have to gain, and as long as that calculation makes sense for them and for you, then I don't see any reason why you wouldn't do that. I think most people, they don't want to give up control. So you need to make sure that that your agreement with other people is to the point where you know what you have to gain from it. So essentially, when I say what you have to gain from it is like, what percentage of the company do you own, and who gets to make decisions? Generally speaking, it's 51% ownership has the decision-making power, but you could give up more than that and then maintain your board and everything like that. You have to really, when you get into that territory, you have to just weigh out the decision that you're making. What is it, a better decision to see it through, meaning a better decision to set it up in your structure, or do you just want to maintain 51% of the business? I wouldn't give it away to, it's not like we're talking about startups that are venture capital backed where you have like different grants that are guaranteed. You really only want it for key employees, and you really only want it for people that you want to be married to, because it really is like a marriage. So somebody, even if they're a minority shareholder, they can be a thorn in your side if something happens, or if they don't like you or they aren't happy with you. So you definitely have to consider that. And so I would highly consider that effect. Will it what will that do for you? And while you're at it, how will it change the face of your business? And then also, can you get the same effect of people working harder if you just give them a bonus structure? Does it have to be in equity? A wise person, my accountant, he told me that equity is really not what you want. That you should just give people a high-end bonus plan so they can make more money that way, because then you're not giving up part of your company, anything, and they don't have to deal with the same complications you do, because not everybody necessarily wants to own a company. It sounds good on paper because we see these gigantic exit numbers and we're like, oh yeah, I want that cash money. But really, most people are better off working on a high incentive plan in the year that you're doing it versus like a sale event, because like there's a tax consideration. There's all kinds of different financial considerations that go into it, and everybody taking more money off the table now. You can lower your tax burden, can lower theirs, and yeah, there's other advantages too. All right, Marcel, good to see you. Talk to you soon. Anybody else have any questions? Looks like a few of you have dropped off, so that's good. That means that you are moving on. This is a lot of time to take up, I know that. So I'm going to leave a little bit more time for questions, and then we're going to be good to go. All right, everybody. I don't see any more questions coming in. The chat's gone a little bit quiet. So this is going to be the end of it. I'll talk to you guys next month when we do our next coaching call. Thank you for your questions. Hopefully gave you some good answers. And if there's anything that wasn't clear, let's definitely follow up on another call or send me a note and we'll clear it up then. Thanks, everybody.